see if this is going to work. Aha, it is. Okay. All right. So thanks, everyone. I'm Merle Massie. I'm the coordinator of the Undergraduate Research Initiative here at the University of Saskatchewan. We designed a series of sessions this year. The first one was kind of an overview session around what is an NSERC USRA and what our timelines are going to be this year. So we recorded that one, I think, November 23rd. And then we did one a week ago Monday, and that was specifically for students because we have a new thing that we're adding this year, the student statement of intent. Both of those sessions were recorded. Both of them are available on our Undergraduate Research Initiative's YouTube channel. So please feel free to watch those. The session today is upon the proposed research project and student role. And I don't know if USask has ever done this, but I wanted to draw particularly faculty's attention to the fact that what you see on the website and what the form looks like versus what NSERC asks us to look for on the backside are two different things. And not completely different, but different enough that I wanted to raise it to your attention. So that's why I designed the session today. Hopefully it won't be too long. I just wanted to give you guys a quick overview of what's happening. So as we gather, as always, a land acknowledgement is a good place to start and a good way. As we gather here today, we acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis, and we pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors and colleagues of this place, and reaffirm our relationship with one another. The second one is one that I developed with the Guanamaw Center for Teaching and Learning. It's my own personal land acknowledgement. I put it on my emails. So if anybody's curious about that process, check out the Guanamaw Center. All right, so the Undergraduate Student Research Awards, as some of you may or may not know, if you'd like an overview of what they are, go check out our YouTube channel. And it gives an overview of what they are and how much they're worth and all that good stuff. And it gives an overview of how to apply. But what happens with these is that the Undergraduate Student Awards, you need to have two people apply, right? So the undergraduate student is half of the application, and the faculty supervisor is the other half of the application. So you need to have a faculty member that you're already connected with that is willing to work with you for the both of you to put together the two halves of the application. So if you're an undergraduate student and you haven't found a supervisor yet, that's your first step, is to reach out and find a supervisor. If you've already done that, you've got a supervisor in place. We did have a session last week, as I mentioned, around the student statement of intent. Please watch that to help you craft your student statement of intent. It's a maximum 1 page. I'm not even going to send the adjudicators a second page, so don't go over. And if it's too small a font that I can't read it, don't do that either. So just stay within boundaries, 12-point font, that kind of thing. And send that to the Undergraduate Research Initiative. You can write and send that anytime, even if you and your supervisor haven't finished up your application, because this comes from you and you can talk about you anytime and mail it to the Undergraduate Research Initiative anytime between now and January 17th is perfectly fine. So, all right. So as I said, we recorded that overview and we're not going to watch it today, but you find it on that YouTube channel. So I just wanted to make sure that you all knew about that. And I'm not watching that. And then, so the application procedure. All applications are submitted to NSERC, to the NSERC USRA. They have a specific portal for NSERC USRAs. What happens is that you create your system login information. Both the student and the supervisor have to do that. You both have to log in and submit. The student has to submit first because you get a number that then the supervisor uses to submit. So Form 202.1 is for the students. Form 202 Part 2 is for the supervisor. Okay. Students, yes, you have to have your transcripts. That's why we were waiting until January. Wait until January to get them. Go into pause, look up transcripts. It takes you to an outside site called MyCreds. You pay them $10. You email yourself a copy of your transcript so that you've got it, because you need that PDF copy to upload to NSERC. So And then the one-page statement of interest, which I've chatted about. And the deadline for all of this is January 17th, which is 2 weeks earlier than normal. And I have received one comment from a college or a department actually that said, that makes it really, really tight. And I appreciate that feedback. And we will take that forward for next year. There was a reason why we put this in place, and that's because we are losing too many students because they're taking summer job. Because it took so long for the process to go through, students didn't know whether or not they won these jobs. And so they were accepting other jobs. And so we were losing some pretty good students. And so we moved the whole process up by a couple of weeks to try and capture those students a little bit earlier. So there is a USask selection committee. I will be publishing the names of all 10 people. They are actually on both of those videos. So I do tell you guys who the 10 people are on that selection committee. They're all USask professors who've had a breadth of experience. Some are fairly new researchers, some are extremely experienced researchers in terms of their support for undergraduate students. They're all NSERC award-winning faculty, and they're going to read those applications and go through the selection process. We will know our USask allocation in January. We don't know it yet, but it should be in and around the same as what we got last year and the year before, which is around that 60, 63 kind of mark. And then we will also create a wait list, because there always seems to be some students who are awarded in that top 60 to 63 who just for whatever reason can't take up the award. And so then we go down the wait list. So just so you know, our intention is to make sure that the students and professors know by the end of February so that you guys can get letters of offer and get those students in place as early as we can. And the NSERC USRA projects will run. We only run them at USask in the summer. Other universities do run fall and winter. We don't. We are so heavily oversubscribed for the summer one that we just only do them all in the summer. So they run from May to August. Okay, so most of you as faculty will know this as well, but the criteria for adjudication, and this is what NSERC sets out for us. So we can't change the criteria. This is what they ask us to look at for adjudication. And there's 3 parts to that. The first is academic excellence. Most of that, not all of it, but most of it comes through your transcripts. So that's why your transcripts are part of it. The second is research potential. That was an area that was identified from past adjudicators as a big gap, which is why we've added the student statement of interest, so that we can hear from the students about your past research experiences, what research is going to do for you as an undergraduate student, why you want a research experience. And so that's why we've added that. And the third, which is the component we're going to talk about today, is the expected quality of the training and mentorship to be received. And this comes in on Form 202 Part 2. This comes from faculty, which is why I wanted to talk about it today. I want to break that down, Form 202 Part 2, and showcase where it's the same and where it's a little bit different from what NSERC asks us to look for. So that's why we're here. So like I said, that student statement of interest, we broke that down and we recorded it, and it's also on our YouTube channel. So please feel free to go and find that. I do want to pause here for just a moment. If you're a University of Saskatchewan faculty member, or you are a student of Indigenous or Black heritage, or if you're a faculty member and one of your students that you're hoping to work with and win an NSERC USRA, if they're a Canadian Indigenous student of Canadian Indigenous heritage, or if they're a Canadian student of Black heritage, we have some special rules this year. So any of you who are faculty will know about Indigenous students. So Indigenous students, NSERC will fund qualified Indigenous students for a summer USRA to exactly the same as all the others, but those awards are over and above our university allocation. Last year, we actually had the most number that we've ever had. We had 5 go forward last year, and I'm hoping to have at least that many again this year or more. So if you're a faculty member and one of the students that you've identified to work with and to bring into your research team comes from Indigenous heritage, make sure that they self-identify on that when they log into the NSERC portal. And there's a kind of a self-identification. Please make sure that they identify. But new for this year, The same rules will apply to students if you have undergraduate students who you want to bring on board and they are of Black heritage, they're Canadian residents, permanent residents, Canadian citizens, or students with refugee status, and they're of Black heritage, and you want them to come into your lab. All of those applications will also, as long as they qualify, as long as the criteria meets NSERC's base level, all of those students will also go forward to NSERC over and above our allocations. So if you self-identify, so the adjudication process will remain the same, including that student statement of interest. However, all of them who apply will be put forward to NSERC as long as you meet the basic criteria. You still have to have the grades, you still have to have, you still have to be an undergraduate student registered in the proper programs. All of those other requirements are still part of it. We have a definition of who is Indigenous from NSERC. We do not yet have a definition of students of Black heritage. At this point, I think self-identification is the best that we can go with at this point. We may have a definition by early January. And if we do, I'll try and blast out that information as quickly as possible. Yes, NSERC has not given us a definition for that. So both together, in terms of Form 202 Part 1, Form 202 Part 2, and that student statement of intent, what they have to do is that they have to tell us about the student, about the research project, and about the proposed mentorship and the student role. So these are kind of there's some complexity to that, so that's why we're here today. So the things that they ask for in Form 202 Part 2 is the proposed research project and the student role. So just to kind of remind everybody, the purpose of an NSERC USRA, and they're very specific about this, is about a potential for a research career in the natural sciences and engineering. They're meant to encourage students to think about graduate work. So I just wanted to make sure that that was quite clear for everyone, that it is something that NSERC is watching for. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that you're going to be disqualified if you've written on that you're hoping to go into dentistry, or you're hoping to go into medicine or veterinary medicine or whatever. It's not that it'll disqualify you. It's just that this is what NSERC, they see this as a bit of a pipeline into graduate studies. And so be open, I suppose. You'd be enthusiastic about research and be open to the possibility of wherever your future might take you. We have seen students who self-identified as being gung-ho for medicine, and because they haven't yet gotten in, they're in graduate school still hoping to get into medicine, and that's perfectly fine. That happens to a lot of students. So subject matter eligibility is another thing that comes up. There's a lot of crossover between NSERC and CIHR. There are professors across campus who have the ability to shape their application in a particular way, and so that it could potentially cross over one or the other, but you need to be very cautious with that because NSERC will reject an application even after it's gone through our internal process. If they think that it should have gone to CIHR instead, they will reject it. So I put this in today just to kind of remind faculty, as you're crafting your part of the application, to be really cognizant of that, and to make sure, even if there are, say, applications of your research down the road to medicine or something like that, make sure that you're specifically focusing on the science, on not the clinical aspect, not the future potential, whatever aspect, but the actual science, and make sure that you're focusing on that. So yeah, just wanted to kind of raise that to our attention. The other thing, of course, is that it's a federal granting agency, and they have a number of policies and guidelines in place around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And they have a lot of statements, even on the NSERC USRA website, around equity, diversity, and inclusion. They haven't gotten to the point yet of saying that every application needs to mention this, but they do point out that applications that do mention it, or that are at least aware of the potential implications, of that will be, it helps them through their adjudication and consideration process. Basically also that, sorry, this is still on subject matter availability. Yeah, I jumped the gun, but that's okay. Talking about EEI, they just want to make sure that everyone who is putting in a natural sciences and engineering application are aware of the fact that there might be gender implications for the research down the road. Maybe you're only looking at boy fish instead of girl fish or whatever it is. Like they're challenging all researchers across Canada to be quite thoughtful about how their research could potentially have EDI implications, even if it's just basic bench science research, and to think those through. Okay, so Form 202 Part 2, some of it's pretty self-explanatory. So this is what your professor is going to be putting together. Oftentimes, a professor will work with a student to create these forms and to kind of have a guiding conversation, and so you feel like you're creating it together, which is a good thing. Obviously, the project profile is the title. The one warning there is that NSERC will pull titles from there and use it for advertising purposes. So make sure your title is good and clear, no acronyms, things like that, spell it out, no company or trade names. Just be aware of the fact that they do use these sometimes for communication purposes. You will have to know your research subject code, well, or faculty will, and of course your department and your institution, that's pretty obvious. Research supervisor profile, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. You're all smart adults. You got where you are because you're smart adults. So you guys know what to do. The research, there may be 8 EDI questions for the research supervisor as well, or in terms of if you wish to self-identify in a particular way. And that's good for NSERC purposes in terms of making sure that they're building policies that really reflect your needs as researchers. So I would encourage people to fill those out, but that's just me. Okay, here's the thing. So when a faculty member downloads Form 202 Part 2, this is what they're going to see. They get this great big space that says outline of proposed research project, and then this teeny little space that says outline of student's role. And so you see this form and you think that this is how you should split what you're talking about. But I've got news for you. No, please don't. Because what's happening is that professors see where it says outline of proposed research project, and they think the research project that I got my big NSERC discovery grant for. And they copy and paste straight from that goes one to the other. The problem is that you need to think about outline of proposed research project that the student is going to undertake. So they're paying attention to that. Like, yes, it's part of a larger project and you might want to put a sentence or two on that, but no more, simply because it's the proposed research project that the student is going to be doing in 4 months, in 16 weeks as part of your overall research. That will help you enormously to write a much better proposal and for the adjudicators to actually adjudicate what the students are going to be doing, because that's what NSERC asks them to adjudicate. So outline of the student's role within that, that's true. But basically, I'm just telling you that these are a little bit unbalanced. And so in terms of what the adjudicators are being asked to look for, some of that information has to be in this space because you only have this much space. You only have one page. And I recognize it's not a lot of space. So that's why I wanted to have the session today, is to kind of reinforce for you guys, there's a bit of a difference between what this looks like on the outside versus what NSERC is asking us to do on the inside. So outline of proposed research, the description of the research project for the duration of the award, 16 weeks, what the student is going to be doing in that 16 weeks. If you can find a way to focus on that part of it, yes, absolutely. Say where it fits into your larger research program, but please focus in on what you're asking that student to do for those 16 weeks. Specify the student's role, absolutely. And then reflect Incorporate diversity considerations if you can. This is a high recommend. It's not necessarily, there are no specific points for it as of yet in terms of NSERC, but it's possible that the USask Adjudication Committee, because NSERC is asking us to do so, they may find a way in our internal adjudication process to recognize that as something that NSERC would like them to pay attention to and potentially put that into the rubric. They haven't finished the rubric yet. They're working on it, but it could potentially be in there. So I just wanted to raise that to your awareness. If there's a way that you can add a sentence about EDI, it's probably not a bad idea. And a best way to do that is to reflect on how EDI could be incorporated into your research design, into your methods, your analysis, but maybe it's best in your interpretation or even your dissemination. And that's okay too. It doesn't necessarily have to be the bench research, but maybe how you talk about it, or maybe the implications that it has. And that's perfectly reasonable. Okay, so when NSERC asks the adjudicators, this is what the NSERC is asking the adjudicators to watch for: the expected quality of the training and mentorship to be received. And if you look back on that application, that's not there. That's not specifically spelled out. So I'm just raising that to your attention that this is what they're asking us to look for. So please make sure you've got it somewhere in your application. So expected quality of the training and mentorship to be received. And these are the examples from NSERC that they're asking us to watch for. Exposure to the research team. How is that student embedded in your research team? How do they connect with them? How do they communicate with them? What's their exposure to your larger research team, your larger research group? What are you training them in specifically? Tell us about a couple of the research techniques or skills, especially if it's a returning, like a new student, that's a little bit easier. If it's a returning student and you're cognizant of that, you know, and that the students had an NSERC before, what are you going to be adding to their skill set this year? What are you going to be challenging them on this year? These are things that you could potentially talk about. So their summer 16-week project, what's the expected contributions to the overall research output? These are also things that they've asked us to look at. You know, are they just washing things and keeping the lab clean? What is the student actually learning? And again, this is not on the list, but it's on our list of things to be watching for: the proposed supervisor's past supervisory experience. And again, they're not trying to trick you or to penalize you if you're a new faculty supervisor. That's okay, because you could potentially talk about how you liked to be supervised when you were a student. That's perfectly reasonable, or what you learned about supervising students while you were going through the process yourself. If you're just building a brand new lab and getting students in place for the first time, these are options for you to talk about. You don't have to have a 30-year career with, you know, have trained 300 students. If you have, great. Numbers aren't necessarily going to help you. You might want to focus instead of how many students and how many PhDs they all went on to get and how many tenure track faculty positions and or whatever. You might want to focus on it's a little bit like writing your teaching, you know, teaching practices. What are your research practices as a research supervisor that really help your students to grow as a researcher? So if you can focus on that's way helpful. Okay, and that's honestly it. I just wanted to raise it to your attention that what it looks like. I'm just going to go back to that page there. I went past it. What this looks like they're asking for versus what they're asking us to watch for don't actually quite line up. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were well aware of that, and so that you guys know what they're actually looking for us, asking for us to pay attention. And those are the 4 things: exposure to research team, training in research techniques and skills, expected contributions to the overall research output, and you as a supervisor, your past supervisory experience. Okay, so with that, does anyone have any questions for me? Go ahead.
Is there anything in your evaluation, but does the supervisor have the funding for the research, like to carry out the research? Like, for example, like we don't know our answers be successful until April, right?
Yeah.
Is it unadvisable then to do in this student project something that's part of that grant that you don't know something?
That's a really good question. And I know that that was always one of the sticking points. In the past, NSERC used to tie the NSERC USRAs to someone who had a sitting discovery grant, but then you guys don't hear about your grants until March, April. And so there was this huge lag period. And so students really didn't know that they had a job. That's one of the reasons why they decoupled that, because they're hoping that it appeals to a broader variety of faculty who may get their funding from somewhere else, not NSERC, right? Which is great. So if you've got community-based funding or your own faculty funding, if you're a startup professor or whatever. In terms of here, flip it on its head. If you don't win that discovery grant, can you still pay your portion of the student? If you can, then go ahead and put in an application. If you can't, I'd hesitate. Does that sound fair? Okay. Good question though, thank you. I'm gonna check and see if there's any questions coming in on the chat. I didn't see any, but if you guys have any, by all means, put them in. Yeah. The weighting hasn't been entirely figured out, but generally so. Okay, how come you sometimes work and sometimes don't? What's up with that? Oh, sorry, yeah, these four. Yeah, these four. So the overall weighting or the weighting within this section, right? Because then there's the overall weighting, which is sort of like a third transcripts, a third the student's statement of intent and students' research potential, and a third this. Yeah, within these four, I'm gonna say probably research and training would be higher, like exposure to the research team and training and research techniques would be slightly higher, and these two slightly lower. But they haven't quite finished the rubric, but I know that that's where they're heading. Well, so each university has the ability to create their own, and we've never had a specific rubric, so we're going to try and see if we can create one. So I pulled rubrics from all kinds of other universities, and we're taking a look at them. The one that we like the best so far is Vancouver Island, but it's not a perfect match because they ask for different things from their students, so it doesn't quite work quite. But yeah, it's a good question. It would be nice if it was standardized. However, one of the biggest differences, Amy, is that some universities centralize it like we do at USask, and others don't. It's they wait until they know their university allocation, and then the physics department gets 5, and biology gets 6, and chemistry gets 3 or whatever, like just depending on how big they are within that university, right? So for NSERC to standardize it completely and create a rubric, it wouldn't fit. Yeah. So we're working on it. And in part, the other thing I've noticed is that it depends on who steps forward to be on the adjudication committee every year, right? To a certain extent. And so, in future years, you'd be very welcome on there. I know you're too busy, but that's okay. I'm just putting that out there. Go ahead, you have a question. That won't matter. You do still need to send, it has to be a new proposal because there's probably some changes, especially if you were funded the first time and it looks like you're doing the same work. That might not, be to your advantage. Make sure that you emphasize how you're going to build on that and what you're going to learn that's different this year. Like what you're going to build on, but what you're looking forward to that's new, right? And new for you from a student perspective. I mean, if it's a 5 or a 10-year research project, there might not be a whole lot of change in the overall research, but maybe there's some changes that can be emphasized in terms of what you as a student are going to be asked to do and what you're going to be learning that's a little bit different and can build on what you did last year. Does that make sense? Oh yeah, right. And just be specific about that. Yeah, we got this far, but we got more to do. And it's not like we're pulling up last year's proposals to compare between last year and this year. That rarely happens. So I wouldn't worry about that so much. Any other questions? I've got to go check the chat. Oh, there is one. I'm coming. Is choosing the successful applicants done with a pure ranking? What if a supervisor puts in applications from 2 very strong students? Is there a preference to give an award to another researcher so each gets one? NSERC USRA. Aaron, that's a really good question. This is a conversation that we've had more than once, both last year with the adjudication and it's already come up this year in terms of, do we have an institutional preference to build sort of cohorts of students with a supervisor or within a lab, or do we want to spread them around across the university? Do we want to preference new and incoming faculty who are building a lab that need the research power in their lab, or do we want to preference sort of those more established labs where we know that there's a lot of depth in the research training? We haven't come to any conclusions on that. Right now, the idea is to let the application stand and fall and go through the adjudication process. So I know that's not the best of answers for you, Aaron. It will depend on the adjudication process. You're welcome. I think what we'll do, everyone, is stop the recording. And if anyone has any further questions, you are welcome to send me an email or comments about any changes to the process, any information that I have or have not provided. Where I'm working really, really hard to try and make sure that we're as transparent as possible. We are going to be putting our 10 adjudicators' names on our NSERC USRA website so that you guys all know who they are. Please don't be mean to them. They're doing their best. And I appreciate their time because it will, especially now that we've added an extra page for them all to read, it will slow them all down in the adjudication process. But they're all there with the best intentions, as well as all of you. I'd love to be able to fund everybody, but we only get so many. But I do encourage you, if you're a faculty member, if you have students who you think could self-identify under those 2 categories of Indigenous or Black, please make sure that you understand and realize that those applications will go forward to NSERC over and above our university allocation. So keep that in mind as you're out there recruiting and talking to students and seeing who's interested in joining you on the research journey. Okay.